The deep ocean has a rule nobody talks about. The further down you go, the stranger everything gets, and not in a fun way. At 200 meters, the light dies. Not dramatically, it just quits. Past that point, every single thing you see has spent millions of years becoming very good at surviving in complete darkness with no food, crushing pressure, and water cold enough that your body would shut down in minutes. You're about to descend in a submarine that may or may not have been inspected properly, and you're gonna meet things that look like mistakes. Fish standing on stilts, squids with arms 8 meters long, jellyfish that call for backup by lighting up and calling the cops. Yes, I am serious, this exists. None of this is an accident. This is what evolution builds when it stops caring about looking normal and focuses entirely on not dying. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. At 900 meters, the first thing you see doesn't move. You just see 3 thin stalks sticking up from the mud, and on top of them is a pale fish just standing there, not swimming, not hunting, just standing, which is not something that fish are supposed to do, but this one clearly doesn't care about that. This is the tripod fish, and it solved the food scarcity problem by deciding that movement is optional. It propped itself up on elongated fin rays, which are basically stilts made of bone, and faces upstream so the current does all of the work. The front fins stick out like antennae, covered in sensors that detect when something edible drifts by. And when prey touches them, the fish snaps forward, and that's it. Meal's over, back to standing. It's the ocean's version of a highway toll man, except the toll is your life, and you don't get a choice about paying. What's efficient about this setup is that the tripod fish doesn't waste energy chasing anything, because at 3,000 meters deep, food is a monthly event if you're lucky, so burning calories on a hunt that might fail is a bad idea. The fish is also essentially blind. Its eyes stopped working millions of years ago because investing in vision at this depth is throwing money into a hole, so instead it just feels the water and waits, for hours, sometimes days, completely motionless. The reproductive situation here is equally grim, which is why every tripod fish is both male and female at the same time, meaning if it never finds a mate, it can just fertilize its own eggs and call it a day. This makes sense when your dating pool is 1 fish per 50 square kilometers, and meeting someone requires one of you to randomly walk in the right direction for several weeks. Evolution looked at that math and said, fine, just handle it yourself. But if we're being honest, even if this one fish met another fish, they would probably be hung up on their ex and they wouldn't get it on. Standing still works if you're patient, but about 1,000 meters deeper, there's something that makes the tripod fish look normal, because what you're about to see isn't just weird, it's broken. It's a squid that looks like someone started building it, got bored halfway through, then just kept adding parts anyway until it stopped making sense. And if you ask me, this is the closest thing we have to what I think might be an alien. You see what looks like floating spaghetti. Long. You're diving and you see what looks like floating spaghetti. Long, thin strands hanging in the water, barely moving. Then you realize the spaghetti is attached to something at the top, and that something is a squid. And the spaghetti is its arms, and they're 8 meters long. This is the bigfin squid, and it's only been seen about a dozen times ever, which is either because it's rare or because it's so good at hiding that we just keep missing it. The arms and tentacles can reach 20 times the length of the body, and they're held at right angles with elbows that shouldn't exist. And the whole thing drifts between 2,000 and 6,000 meters like it's buffering. It moves so slowly you could watch it for an hour and not be sure if it's alive or just a decoration that got loose. The scary part, this isn't even the biggest they get. We've only seen juveniles, and we think from the science we know that they get even bigger. Even more interesting, scientists don't actually know how it eats. The best guess is that it drags those arms along like fishing lines and snags tiny crustaceans when they bump into it, because the arms are thin and definitely can't handle anything that fights back. Another theory is that it just hangs there and waits for something to touch it. A flypaper strategy that works because at this depth, most things are half blind and bumbling around anyway. The problem is that no adult bigfin squid has ever been captured. So all of this is just educated guessing, which means that we've been studying this thing since the late 90s and still don't understand what it has for lunch. What is even more strange is that the body is only 30 to 60 centimeters, but it's dragging around limbs that span the length of a school bus. It sacrifices every advantage a squid normally has: speed, power, the ability to fight, just to maximize reach of its arms. The deep sea doesn't reward being fast, it just rewards covering distance without moving. So that's a squid built wrong on purpose. It's not great, but at least it's quiet. The next thing you see is not trying to scare you. It's trying to scare something bigger than you, and when it does, the entire water column lights up because this jellyfish has figured out that the best defense isn't hiding. It's mutually assured destruction. You're diving at the bottom of the ocean in complete darkness. Then, without warning, blue light. Not just one spot, but a spinning wheel of it rotating around a jellyfish like a police siren. This is not a greeting. This is a distress call. The atolla jellyfish has a defense mechanism that is honestly unfair because when something attacks it, the jelly doesn't fight back. It just flashes a concentric ring of blue lights at 5 to 50 centimeters per second. And the purpose of this light show is to attract something bigger and meaner that will attack the thing attacking it, which essentially means this jellyfish is weaponized snitching. It calls the cops on you, except the cops are also trying to eat you, and the cops also are probably going to eat the jellyfish, which normally shouldn't happen, but in society, that's kind of how cops are working these days. So, everyone loses. Dr. Edith Wetter once built a fake atolla jellyfish that mimicked this exact distress signal and successfully used it to lure in a giant squid. Think about that. Literally tells you how effective this alarm is. Giant squids will literally show up from this. Literally, this is mutually assured destruction. If you come and eat me, I'm going to call the police and they're going to come eat us both. The jellyfish itself is small. It's only 5 to 15 centimeters across, and it's deep red so it's invisible at depth, with one long trailing tentacle that's several times its body length and about 20 to 30 regular tentacles forming a crown around the rim. It fishes passively. The long tentacle just hangs out in the current and waits for something to touch it, and when that happens, the jelly contracts the tentacle and pulls the prey to its mouth. No brain, just reflex and chemistry, but effective enough that these things are everywhere between 1,000 and 4,000 meters. The red color on it hides any bioluminescent prey in its stomach, because if you eat something glowing and you're transparent, you become a target. So the atolla jelly just digests in stealth mode. Most of the time it's drifting, invisible, not doing anything. The light show only happens when death is close enough to justify the energy cost. Now, flashing lights work if you want help, but the next thing drifting past uses light differently, not to call for backup, but to vanish completely. And it does this by turning into a cloud of yellow sparkles that shouldn't even be possible at this depth, where everything that glows usually glows blue. This is tomopterus, a gossamer worm that's built like a ribbon with paddle fins running down both sides, and it swims instead of crawls, which most worms don't do, but this one has rejected the traditional worm lifestyle entirely. It's only a few centimeters long, sometimes 60 if it's having a good year, and so transparent that you can see through it to the gut, which is bright orange or red, specifically to hide any bioluminescent prey it just ate, because glowing from the inside is how you advertise yourself that you're on the Happy Meal menu. The real issue is the proboscis. Tomopterus keeps it stored inside its body until prey swims close, then shoots the whole thing out, turns it inside out, and grabs the target with what might be venom, depending on the species. Scientists aren't completely sure, because studying a transparent worm at 3,000 meters down is harder than it sounds. When threatened, some species release glowing yellow particles from the tips of their paddles, a sudden burst of gold in the dark that scrambles a predator's vision long enough for the worm to get away. Others curl up to look like a jellyfish, others just break off chunks of their whole body that keep glowing while the main part escapes, sacrificing the piece to save the whole, which works because these worms can regenerate what they lose. Monterey Bay researchers found at least 18 species of tomopterus living in the same water, which suggests that this body plan, the transparent swimming and armed one, is working well enough that evolution kept making more of them. Now, breaking off glowing parts is one way to handle predators, but our next fish has a different approach. It doesn't run, it doesn't hide, it doesn't fight. It just turns itself into the sky and hopes you're too stupid to notice a difference. The deep sea hatchet fish is thin enough to hide behind a pencil and has decided its entire survival strategy is going to be become invisible by faking the background, which sounds simple until you realize the background is the faint glow of sunlight from 500 meters above, and the fish has to match that glow perfectly or it's just a floating snack. It does this with xenophyophores, light-producing organs along its belly that emit blue light at exactly the right brightness to cancel out its own shadow when something looks up from below. This fish can adjust the intensity in real time depending on how much actual sunlight is filtering down, which means it's running active camouflage that requires constant recalibration, and if it gets the brightness wrong even slightly, it's visible again and probably about to die. This only works in the twilight zone between 200 and 600 meters, where there's still a tiny bit of light to fake, but deeper than that, there's nothing to match and the whole system stops making sense. The hatchet fish is 2 to 12 centimeters long, compressed so flat that it's almost two-dimensional, with enormous tubular eyes that point straight up and can't move, which means this fish is permanently staring at the sun and ceiling, and that's just how it lives now. The eyes are huge, taking up most of the head. They're built to detect the faintest silhouette of prey above, and the mouth also points up, so when it spots something, it just rises slightly and snaps. Despite having teeth that look genuinely threatening, most hatchetfish eat copepods, tiny crustaceans that don't put up much of a fight, which makes the teeth seem like overkill. But evolution doesn't remove tools that still work occasionally. Every night, the fish migrates up to 50 or 100 meters to feed where plankton is thicker, then retreats back down before dawn when light would expose it. Matching the sky takes effort and precision, but the next fish doesn't bother with camouflage at all. It just carries headlights and uses them to hunt, signal, and occasionally disorient anything that thought attacking was a good idea. You're diving deep down in the ocean, and two blue-green lights blink at you from the dark. Then they blink off, then on again. This is either a creature or you're having a stroke from the pressure. It turns out it's a fish with literal headlamps under its eyes that can turn on and off at will by covering them with a flap of skin or rotating them into a pocket. Flashlight fish are small, 10 to 15 centimeters, and the lights aren't made by the fish. They're colonies of bioluminescent bacteria living in pouches below the eyes, glowing constantly, and the fish just controls the shutters. During the day, the fish hides in reef caves and keeps the lights covered, possibly to let the bacteria rest, or maybe just to avoid attracting things that would eat a glowing target. At night, it comes out and opens the shutters, and suddenly it's got working headlights in an environment where most things are blind. The fish uses the lights for three things. First, hunting. It shines them on plankton to see what it's eating, holding the beam steady when it spots prey and blinking less when it's focused. Second, talking. Schools of flashlight fish coordinate with each other using blink patterns, each species with its own rhythm, and synchronized flashing helps them stay together or possibly confuse predators by creating overlapping lights that are hard to track. Third, escaping. If something attacks, the fish blinks off, turns hard, and leaves the predator chasing a fading glow that's no longer where the fish is. The bacteria get food and safety. The fish gets a built-in flashlight it can aim and control. Both sides benefit, which means this is one of the cleaner partnerships in the deep sea, where most relationships involve someone getting eaten. Now, having headlights is useful, but if you're willing to commit to never moving again, there's a more efficient way to hunt, and it involves sitting on the seafloor with your mouth wide open and just waiting for something to make a mistake. You're diving deep down in the ocean, and on the rocks there's something that looks like a pale flower. It's translucent with a large opening pointing upward. You assume it's some kind of sponge or maybe a coral, but then a shrimp drifts too close to the opening and the entire thing clamps shut in a fraction of a second, trapping the shrimp inside, and you realize the flower is a mouth and the mouth is an entire animal. This is Megalodicopia, a predatory tuniket, which is a sea squirt that gave up filter feeding and went into the ambush business instead. It anchors itself to rock between 200 and 1,000 meters deep, holds its siphon open in a wide hood, and waits for prey to swim and drift inside, at which point muscular walls slam the opening close and the victim is sealed in a stomach with no exit. The tuniket doesn't reopen for days, sometimes longer, just sits there digesting while everything outside continues, not knowing there's a trap right there. Inside the siphon, there's sticky mucus and sense cells that detect contact, so the moment something touches the interior, the whole system triggers. No hesitation, no second chances. It can't chase, it can't move, it can't adjust its position. So the entire strategy depends on things wandering into range by accident or because the tuniket might be releasing chemical lures that make prey curious. Scientists aren't really sure, but what they do know is that when food is scarce, the tuniket can revert to filter feeding on detritus and bacteria. But its primary food is from being a carnivore, which is unusual for something that's technically related to vertebrates. Does it remind you of anything? It reminds me exactly of a Venus flytrap, but it's interesting seeing a Venus flytrap at the bottom of the ocean. Its reproduction is equally isolated. Every individual is a hermaphrodite that can fertilize its own eggs if no other tunicate is nearby, which is often the case because these things are spread thin across canyon walls and abyssal plains. The self-fertilization produces larvae that drift until they settle and build the next stationary mouth. A mouth that never moves works if prey comes to you. Next predator also doesn't move much, but when it does, the strike is so fast you won't see it happen. You'll just see the aftermath, which is something half swallowed and very dead. You're diving deep in the ocean and you see a pale gray shape on the mud, propped up slightly on its pectoral fins, its head raised and mouth full of needles arranged in rows. This is Bathysaurus ferox, the deep sea lizardfish, and it hasn't moved in 3 days, maybe even longer. It's waiting for something to swim within range, and when that happens, the head snaps back and the jaws open wider than should be possible because there's no floor in its mouth. The membrane between the jawbones is gone, which removes water resistance and allows this fish to close its bite fast enough that prey doesn't have any time to react. The teeth curve inwards so anything caught can't pull free, and the neck has a special hinge that throws the head back to increase a gape, which means the lizardfish can swallow prey nearly as large as itself, if it's patient enough to digest it. And it is patient because meals at 600 to 3,500 meters are infrequent at best. So the fish has a liver that's 20% of its total body weight just for storing energy between kills. It might go weeks or months without eating, burning almost no calories while it waits, and then gorge when the opportunity comes and process the meal slowly in near freezing water where metabolisms run at a crawl. It eats fish, squid, crabs, other lizardfish. There is no preference, just opportunity. If it's meat and it's within striking distance, it's food. This puts Bathysaurus at the top of the abyssal food chain, which is less impressive when you realize the competition is sparse and half blind, but the title still stands. Every lizardfish is also both male and female. It's another hedge against its isolation, and can self-fertilize if it never encounters a mate, which is statistically likely given that the population density down here is measured in individuals per square kilometer, not per square meter like other fish. You know, fish that weight makes sense. Fish are supposed to hunt, but what you're seeing now isn't a fish, and it's not supposed to be this big, because spiders don't belong in the ocean, and they definitely don't belong at half a meter wide walking across the seafloor on 8 jointed legs. You're diving deep down looking for things on the rocks, and you see just legs at first, these long, thin, slowly moving legs. At the center, where the legs meet, there's almost nothing. You see a tiny body that's functionally just a connecting point for limbs. This is a sea spider. The genus is Clausendetes, and its leg span can reach 70 centimeters, which is larger than most dinner plates and completely unreasonable for something that's supposed to be an arthropod. The body is so small that the guts and reproductive organs don't even fit inside it, so they extend into the legs instead, turning each limb into a carrier for vital systems, which works because the legs are long enough to house them, and because at this depth in cold, oxygen-rich water, the whole setup doesn't collapse under its own biology. It is not a true spider, it's just a distant relative that evolution stretched into something unsettling, and it moves across the mud in slow, jerky steps, each leg lifting and placing deliberately, because speed is not the goal, coverage is. It feeds by inserting a tubular proboscis into soft-bodied prey, anemones, hydroids, corals, jellyfish, and it sucks out the fluids, which sounds passive, but researchers have watched them clip off tentacles from anemones and walk away carrying the pieces, so there is some level of food theft involved. The proboscis works as both straw and cutting tools depending on what the spider needs at the time. It also has no respiratory system. Oxygen just diffuses through the thin cuticle covering the body and legs, which only works in cold water when oxygen saturation is high and metabolic demand is low, meaning if you transported one of these to warm, shallow water, it would suffocate despite being surrounded by oxygen, because the physics stop adding up. Males also carry eggs on specialized leg appendages, which adds another set of limbs to an already scary design. Sea spiders are at least obviously alive and moving. What's on the seafloor next to it looks like a clump of dirt, maybe some kind of rock formation, and you're about to swim past it until someone tells you that that's actually not dirt. It's not a rock either. It's a single cell that's somehow the size of your hand. Xenophyophores are giant amoebas that build houses out of whatever's lying around on the seafloor. sand grains, dead shells, bits of clay, and then they glue it all together into structures that can reach 10 to 25 centimeters across, with some hitting nearly 30 centimeters, which is roughly a foot wide for something that's technically one cell. Not a colony, but just one cell that decided the normal rules about size don't apply to it anymore. The shapes vary depending on species and mood, apparently, because some look like flat fans, others build themselves into spherical mud balls, and others make tangled webs that resemble brain coral, except it's all just one organism with thousands of nuclei floating around inside doing their job, while the rest of the cell extends thin strands out into the mud to gather food. Those strands, pseudopodia, reach through the shell and grab detritus, bacteria, and bits of dead plankton, whatever is available, and pull it back in so it can digest. What's strange is that some xenophyophores might be farming. They produce slimy threads covered in waste material, and bacteria grow on that waste, and then the cell possibly eats that bacteria, which would make this a single-celled organism running its own agricultural business at the bottom of the ocean. Researchers aren't completely certain yet, but the evidence suggests that it's growing food on purpose rather than just filtering what drifts by. The shell isn't just protection either, it's architecture. These things dominate abyssal plains in some regions, adding structure to flat mud and creating habitat for worms, snails, and crustaceans that would otherwise have nowhere to hide. In the Clarion-Clipperton zone, where deep-sea mining companies are eyeing the seafloor, xenophyophores are the most common large organism, which means any mining operation is going to be bulldozing fields of giant single cells that have been building dirt castles for millions of years. Now, giant cells that build houses are weird, but they're not really dangerous. They're just sitting there doing their old cell thing. What's lying in the sediment a few meters away is dangerous, and you won't know it's dangerous until part of it inverts itself and fires outward faster than you can process what just happened. You're diving deep in the ocean, and you see a long pink rope in the mud. It's smooth and maybe 2 meters long if stretched out fully, which it won't because ribbon worms don't straighten unless they're chasing something or running from something, and right now it's doing neither. It's just lying there waiting for prey to get close enough that distance stops mattering. When that happens, the worm's head doesn't lunge forward. Instead, something shoots out of its head, a proboscis that was stored inside a special cavity, now turning inside out and extending like a biological harpoon that wraps around the target or stabs it depending on the species. Some ribbon worms have barbed spikes on the proboscis, others have sticky mucus, others branch out into multiple tendrils that fan out and snare anything in range, and there's one genus called Gorgonophaceus that has a proboscis that splits into many branches. It looks like a net made of worm, all of it extending from a single point on the head, grabbing shrimp or crustaceans and pulling them back to the mouth while they're still trying to figure out what was happening. The proboscis often carries venom too. Not always, but enough that anything caught isn't struggling for long, and once the worm retracts the proboscis, the prey comes with it already immobilized, and then gets swallowed without much fuss. When disturbed, some ribbon worms produce bioluminescent mucus or toxic slime, and if something bites them, they can split apart intentionally, leaving the predator with a chunk while the main body escapes and regenerates what was lost over the next few weeks. Parberlagia corrugatus, which is an Antarctic species that shows up in deep water, secretes a neurotoxin strong enough to cause numbness on human skin. And when researchers drop bait or carcasses, these worms swarm the site in tangles of pink and orange, dissolving flesh with secretions and feeding until there's nothing left. Worms that weaponize their own body parts are one thing. The next creature doesn't hunt at all though, and it doesn't need to, because it's figured out how to grow its own food and does this by waving its arms over hydrothermal vents, like it's conducting a very slow, very weird orchestra made entirely of bacteria. You're diving deep down in the depths of the ocean. You see white crabs clustered around a vent opening. There's dozens of them, all holding their claws up and waving them slowly in the current. And their claws are covered in what looks like blonde fur, except it's not fur. It's dense colonies of bacteria growing on hair-like bristles, and the crabs are feeding the bacteria on purpose so that they can eat them later. This is agriculture. Underwater bacterial agriculture performed by a blind crab at 2,000 meters down. The Yeti crab is about 15 centimeters long. It's pale, eyeless, and its entire survival depends on it keeping those bacteria healthy, which it does by positioning itself near the vent where chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and methane seep out, then waving its hairy claws through the flow so the bacteria can get the oxygen and chemicals that they need to grow. The bacteria use chemosynthesis. They're making energy from chemicals instead of sunlight, and the crabs let them multiply on its arms, then periodically scrapes them off with specialized mouth parts and eats them. Most of its nutrition comes from this crop. It is literally farming, and it's efficient enough that you will sometimes see hundreds of Yeti crabs around one single vent wherever they are active, forming what researchers have called living quilts because they pack so tightly together, all waving in unison, trying to get their bacteria the best access to vent chemicals without getting close enough to become Red Lobster's Tuesday special. The Antarctic species, Kiwi tyleri, was nicknamed the Hoff crab because the hairy chest resembled David Hasselhoff. You know, the guy from SpongeBob, which is maybe the only time that man's chest hair has contributed to scientific taxonomy, but the name stuck. The crabs can also eat particles and small animals if available, but the bacteria are the main income, and the bacteria likely help detoxify the vent water by consuming the sulfides that would otherwise be harmful to most other species. Farming bacteria requires commitment to one spot, waving your arms until something grows, but the next fish doesn't farm anything, doesn't wait for food to drift by, and doesn't rely on luck. It hunts with a flashlight that's invisible to everything except the fish holding it, which is kind of an unfair advantage that wins wars. You're diving down deep in the ocean, you see a small fish drifting in the dark, maybe 25 centimeters long, and under each eye there are two spots, one green, one red, and they glow on command. This is the Stoplight loosejaw, and the red light is the whole point because almost nothing in the deep ocean can see red wavelengths, which means this fish is carrying a spotlight that only works for it, illuminating prey that have no idea they're being lit up and targeted. You see these two tanks behind me? If I made that light completely red, the fish would not be able to see it. I could literally walk up to the tank, all of the nighttime creatures would come out and think it's nighttime, and they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Most deep sea creatures and most aquatic fish see blue light. Some can handle green, but red is off the spectrum almost completely. So when the loose light turns on its red photophore, it's effectively hunting with night vision while everything else is blind. The fish can see the reflection of its own red beam off of a shrimp or smaller fish, track the target, and then move in while the prey just keeps swimming, unaware there's a predator closing the distance. The jaw situation makes this even worse. The lower jaw has no floor. There's no tissue connecting its two sides, just empty space between its bones, which removes water resistance when the jaw swings open and allows the fish to snap shut faster than prey can react. The teeth are long, curved, and transparent, so they don't reflect light, and parts of the skull are see-through for the same reason, making the whole head harder to spot even if something does look directly at it. Despite having a scary mouth full of needles, stomach analysis shows that the loosejaw often just eats copepods and small crustaceans, which seems like overkill given the weapons involved, but the jaw design works just as well on tiny prey as it does on fish, just like that other fish we talked about earlier in the video. So there's really no evolutionary pressure for it to specialize. It can eat whatever's available, and the red light helps find both. Now, having night vision is a pretty cool way to hunt in the deep ocean, but the next animal doesn't bother with advanced optics. It just lies at two different life stages, tells completely different stories about what it is, and both versions are convincing enough that predators and prey fall for it. You're diving deep down in the cold, deep dark ocean, and you see what looks like a jellyfish floating past. Its long, trailing tentacles and delicate body, it's the kind of jellyfish thing that stings you if you touch it. Except part of it is actually a squid, and the jellyfish part is fake. It is actually a long, ornate tail that the squid is dragging behind it on purpose to look dangerous. This is a juvenile swordtail squid, and it's pretending to be a xenophyophore, which are colonies of stinging animals that most predators avoid. So by mimicking one, the squid gets free protection without having to produce venom or fight anything. The tail is nearly as long as the squid's body, with pigment patches that resemble the stinging parts of real xenophyophores, and the squid even curls its body to sell the illusion better. This works until the squid grows large enough that predators stop being a primary concern, at which point it sheds the tail entirely and switches strategies, because now it's the predator on the hunt. Adult swordtail squids develop extremely long feeding tentacles with bioluminescent lures at the tips. So these are small glowing spots that attract curious fish and crustaceans, and when something comes to investigate the light, the tentacles shoot out and grab it. The squid hangs motionless in the water column between 500 and 1,000 meters, dangles the lures far below its body so predators go for the lights instead of the squid, and if something does grab a lure, the tentacle might detach completely, leaving the predator holding a glowing decoy while the squid jets away. 2 life stages, 2 completely different lies it sells its prey and predators. First it says, "Don't eat me, I'm venomous." And then it says, "Come closer, I'm just harmless." And both are a complete lie that'll get you killed. The ocean really rewards dishonesty if you're convincing. Lying about what you are gets you through the day, but past 1,000 meters, the pressure increases, the temperature drops further, and the last thing you see before your lights give out isn't lying about anything. It's just drifting, enormous, with arms that extend down into the dark like curtains. And it doesn't care if you see it, because by the time you do, you're already close enough to be a problem. While diving deep one night, your light catches something overhead. It's a bell, and it's deep red and it's over a meter across, and it's pulsing slowly, and before it are 4 ribbon-like arms that keep going, 10 meters down, maybe more, hanging in the water column and swaying with currents that you can't feel. This is Stygia gigantea, the giant phantom jelly, and it's one of the largest jellyfish in the ocean, but also one of the rarest. There are only around 100 confirmed sightings ever, which means that you're looking at something most people will never see and might not believe exists if you told them about it later. It has no tentacles, just 4 massive oral arms that act as drift nets, spreading wide to snag anything that swims or drifts into them. Fish, crustaceans, other jellyfish, and once something touches the sticky mucus coating the arms, it's held there while the jelly slowly pulls it up towards the central mouth. The bell pulses to maneuver and rise, but most of the movement is passive, just drifting in the deep water between 1,000 and 4,000 meters, waiting for prey to make a mistake. Small fish called pelagic brotulas sometimes live inside the jelly's arms, swimming among the folds, either immune to whatever stinging cells might be there, or just tolerated because they clean parasites off the jelly or scavenge scraps from its meals. The name Stygia comes from the river Styx in Greek mythology, the boundary between Earth and the underworld, which fits because the jelly looks like something that shouldn't exist in a place humans can reach. Well, it kind of doesn't, but except it does exist and you're watching it drift back into darkness where the lights can't follow. That is the journey from 200 meters where things are just barely uncomfortable down to 4,000 where everything has committed to strategies that work in total darkness under crushing pressure with no food and no light. The deeper you go, the less anything resembled what you would call normal. Not because evolution is trying to scare you, but because survival at those depths requires solutions that look wrong on the surface. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to give it a like and comment down below what was your favorite creature to learn about. Please also subscribe to the channel and hit the post notifications as I really want to hit 1,000 subscribers. And if you want to watch another one of my videos, then you can click the one that's on the screen right now.